David.
What have you been up to in the sun today?
What was that, my love?
What have you been up to in the sun today?
Me specifically, or just generally?
Well, generally. Get outside reading or in the hot tub again? Or?
I was in the hot tub. I was in the hot tub again today.
Frankie!
I'm sorry.
Why am I not there with you? Never mind being with Nick.
Why are we all not there with
Not
you?
start this again. Every time.
Just
Every
not
time.
on. Not on.
It was awful. It was awful.
It's too cold.
Hi, Bina.
Try that, but
Hello.
sincerity.
There should totally be a group which is like the small joys of quarantine. Yeah.
That's this group, right?
Very much.
This group is one of the small joys of quarantine.
Also, Jen and Nev sent me cocktails in the post, so that's pretty great.
Oh,
They come in this format. So it's like pre-mixed, and then you tear this corner off, and it pours it in the glass.
That is very cool.
Coffee vanilla E1 was too sweet, but this Negroni has been pretty great.
I like it.
Very gel.
I don't know if she's gonna actually be able to make it because she's on night shift, but I spoke to Jess earlier on today.
Oh my god.
Gonna try and join us.
That would be so cool.
Doesn't get pulled into ICU, which is what she is currently working on. So,
What a babe. Oh well, if she doesn't make it, hi Jess. Hi Jess. Everyone say hi to Jess.
Hi, Jess.
Hi, Jess.
I love you.
we love you.
Love you, Jess.
We love you, Jess. Hey Em.
I am.
We have a David today as well.
I know.
hey.
Hi.
I love you, David.
Love you too.
I love the first 10 minutes of these videos are just people being like, hi, I love you, hi.
David.
Hey, hey.
So we have M, but we also have just M, who is mysterious.
Yeah.
Wonderful mystery. Hi to both M's.
Hi, Lisa. Hi, Jonas.
Other M, is that Ellie? Is that you, Ellie? Potentially.
It's now.
No, there's two.
I know.
We've got all of the mms.
Hey folks, I love you. And then I'm going to mute and make some hot chocolate.
Is that hi, Sweet Pea.
He's gone to make hot chocolate.
It's very important. There was an incident with some soya milk. I have too much unsweetened soya milk. I need to get rid of it, but also I need to get rid of all the hot chocolate I have, which
I was
is...
gonna say, you've got so much hot chocolate.
You need to get rid of.
Freeze it.
Or drink it.
Sounds like an awful dilemma either way, Gordon.
I'm going to be in the freezer drinking some hot chocolate. Can't wait.
Do I have time to go and get some chocolate?
Yeah, go for it. We won't start without you, honey.
So on the list of things that make me want to eat chocolate mousse, I never thought I'd include Star Trek, but they were all over the chocolate mousse in Star Trek.
Really?
Yeah, it was in a sexy way as well.
What was the storyline there then? Are you sure it was Star Trek? Wasn't some fanfic?
Definitely Star Trek. Wesley Crusher falling in love
With a chocolate mousse.
with, well, offering chocolate mousse as a
Love gift.
love gift.
Oh man.
For dipping of fingers and licking suggestively.
And if there's anything that's amazing, watching Whoopi Goldberg give dating advice to Will Wheaton, it's like.
That sounds amazing. I feel like offering chocolate mousse, that's like a power love gift. That's, who can resist that?
Not me.
Oh.
Is it going to be an exciting night tonight, Frankie? What's happening in the story?
I think so. I did have a little look over it, but I've not had time to kind of properly read through it. I think it's going to be quite exciting. Not as exciting as last time, perhaps.
Aww.
Are there going to be any new accents on display?
God, I hope not. There's a fair chunk of like Poppet and Widget in this one. I was like, oh no, I really am so.
Oh, bless you. You're fabulous.
You're fabulous.
I thought, oh yeah, the twins are Irish. I'll try and do it. Whatever book we do next, I'm not doing accent.
Where does it say they're Irish though?
I mean, you say that, but you just can't resist.
There'll probably a kind of generic Yorkshire one will creep in there somewhere, but beyond that, it's all going to be done by pitch. It's all going to be pitch.
Nick says it's Lancashire you're doing, it's not Yorkshire.
Yeah. That's intentional. Well, as long as it's from somewhere, that's good. That's progress on what I thought was happening.
I think we need some Welsh in there somewhere. Get some melodic vibes, you know.
I remember when Siri came out, my Welsh friend went on the full-on rant on the fact that it couldn't understand him.
I'm still waiting for someone to take up the Yorkshire dialect reading challenge.
Yeah, Britta.
Storytime.
Storytime?
Storytime.
Hey.
I think so.
Okay. Now, are you all sitting comfortably? Then I'll begin. Reflections and distortions. The sign says Hall of Mirrors, but when you enter, you find it is more than a simple hall. You are met not with floor-length, unadorned planes of mirrored glass, as you half expected, but hundreds of mirrors of varying sizes and shapes, each in a different frame. As you move past one mirror reflecting your boots, the mirror next to it shows only empty space and the mirrors on the other side. Your scarf is not present in one mirror, and then it returns in the next. Reflected behind you, there is a man in a bowler hat, though he appears in some mirrors and not in others. When you turn, you cannot locate him in the room, though there are more patrons walking along with you than you had seen within the glass. The hall leads to a round room, the light within it bright as you enter. It radiates from a tall lamppost that sits in the centre, towering black iron with a frosted glass lamp that looks as though it would be more at home on a city street corner than in a circus tent. The walls here are completely mirrored, each long mirror placed to align with a striped ceiling visible above and the floor that is painted to match. As you walk farther into the room, it becomes a field of endless street lamps, the stripes repeating in fractal patterns over and over and over. Cartomancy, Concord, Massachusetts, October 1902. As he continues to walk around the circus, Bailey's path leads back to the courtyard. He stops briefly to watch the sparkling bonfire and then at a vendor to purchase a bag of chocolates to make up for his mostly uneaten dinner. The chocolates are shaped like mice, with almond ears and licorice tails. He eats 2 immediately and puts the rest of the bag in the pocket of his coat, hoping they will not melt. He chooses another direction to leave the courtyard, circling away from the bonfire again. He passes several tents with interesting signs, but none that he feels compelled to enter just yet, still playing the illusionist's performance over in his mind. As the path turns, he comes upon a smaller tent with a lovely, elaborate sign. Fortune teller. He could read that bit easily, but the rest is a complex swirl of intricate letters, and Bailey has to walk right up to it to read, fates foretold and darkest desires disclosed. Bailey looks around. For a moment, there is no one else in sight in either direction, and the circus feels eerily similar to the way it had when he snuck through the fence in the middle of the day, as though it is empty save for himself and the things and people that are always there. The ongoing argument about his own future echoes in his ears as he enters the tent. Bailey finds himself in a room that reminds him of his grandmother's parlour, only smelling less of lavender. There are seats, but all of them are unoccupied, and a sparkling chandelier captures Bailey's attention for a moment before he notices the curtain. It is made up of strings of shiny beads. Bailey has never seen anything like it. It shimmers in the light, and he is not entirely sure whether he should walk through it or wait for some sort of sign or notice. He looks around for an informatively worded sign, but finds nothing. He stands confused in the empty vestibule, and then a voice calls out from behind the beaded curtain. "Do come in, please," the voice says. A woman's voice, quiet, and sounding as though she is standing right next to him, though Bailey is sure that the voice came from the next room. Hesitantly, he puts a hand out to touch the beads, which are smooth and cold, and he finds that his arm slips through them easily, that they part like water or long grass. The beads clatter as the strands hit one another, and the sound that echoes in the dark space sounds like rain. The room he is in now is much less like his grandmother's parlour. It is filled with candles, and there is a table in the centre, with an empty chair on one side and a lady dressed in black with a long, thin veil over her face, seated on the other. On the table there is a deck of cards and a large glass sphere. "Have a seat, please, young man," the lady says, and Bailey walks a few steps to the empty chair and sits down. The chair is surprisingly comfortable, not like the stiff chairs at his grandmother's, though they do look remarkably similar. It only now strikes Bailey that, other than the red-haired girl, he has never heard any person in the circus speak. The illusionist was silent for her entire performance, though he had not noticed it at the time. "I am afraid payment is required before we may begin," she says. Bailey is relieved that he has excess pocket money for the unplanned expense. "How much is payment?" he asks. "Whatever you wish to pay for a glimpse of your future," the fortune teller says. Bailey stops to consider this for a moment. It is strange, but fair. He pulls what he hopes is a suitable amount from his pocket and puts it on the table, and the woman does not pick the money up but passes her hand over it, and it disappears. "Now, what is it you would like to know?" she asks. "About my future," Bailey says. "My grandmother wants me to go to Harvard, but my father wants me to take over the farm." "And what do you want?" the fortune teller asks. "I don't know," Bailey says. She laughs in response, but in a friendly way, and it makes Bailey feel more at ease, as though he is just talking to a regular person and not someone mysterious or magical. "That's fine," she says. "We can see what the cards have to say about the matter." The fortune teller picks up the deck and shuffles, shifting the cards from one hand to the other. They fold over and under each other in waves. Then she spreads them across the table in one fluid motion, forming an arc of identical black and white patterned card backs. Choose a single card, she says. Take your time. This will be your card, the one that will represent you. Bailey looks at the arc of cards and frowns. They all look the same. Slivers of pattern, some wider than the others, some not quite as evenly lined up as the rest. He looks back and forth from end to end, and then one of them catches his eye. It is more hidden than the rest, almost completely covered by the card above it. Only the edge is visible. He reaches out for it, but hesitates just before his hand reaches it. I can touch it? He asks. He feels the same as when he was first allowed to set the table with the nicest dishes, as though he really shouldn't be allowed to touch such things, mixed with an acute fear of breaking something. But the fortune teller nods, and Bailey puts a finger on the card and pulls it away from its compatriots so it sits separately on the table. You may turn it over, the fortune teller says, and Bailey flips the card. On the other side, it is not like the black and red playing cards he is used to, with hearts and clubs and spades and diamonds. Instead, it is a picture, inked in black and white and shades of grey. The illustration is of a knight on horseback, like a knight from a fairy tale. His horse is white and his armour is grey. There are dark clouds in the background. The horse is mid-gallop, the knight leaning forward in the saddle, with sword drawn as though he is on his way to a great battle of some sort. Bailey stares at the card, wondering where the knight is going and what the card is supposed to mean. Cavalier d'épée, it reads in fancy script at the bottom of the card. This is supposed to be me? Bailey asks. The woman smiles as she pushes the arc of cards back into a neat pile. It is meant to represent you in your reading, she says. It could mean movement or travel. The cards do not always mean the same things every time. They change with each person. That must make them hard to read, Bailey says. The woman laughs again. Sometimes, she says. Shall we give it a try anyway? Bailey nods and she shuffles the cards again, over and under, and then divides them into 3 piles and places them in front of him, above the card with the knight. Pick which pile you are most drawn to, she says. Bailey studies the piles of cards. One is less neat, another larger than the other 2. His eyes keep going back to the pile on the right. This one, he says, and though it is mostly a guess, it feels like the proper choice. The fortune teller nods and stacks the 3 piles of cards back into one deck, leaving Bailey's chosen cards on top. She flips them over one at a time, laying them face up in an elaborate pattern across the table, some overlapping and others in rows, until there are about a dozen cards laid out. They are black and white pictures, much like the knight, some simpler, some more complicated. Many show people in various settings, and a few have animals, while some of them have cups or coins, and there are more swords. Their reflections catch and stretch in the crystal sphere that sits alongside. For a few moments, the fortune teller looks at the cards, and Bailey wonders if she is waiting for them to tell her something. And he thinks she is smiling, but trying to hide it just a bit. This is interesting, the fortune teller says. She touches one card, a lady in flowing robes holding a set of scales, and another Bailey cannot see as well but looks like a crumbling castle. What's interesting? Bailey asks, still confused about the process. He knows no ladies in blindfolds, has been to no crumbling castles. He's not even sure there are castles in New England. You have a journey ahead of you, the fortune teller says. There's a lot of movement, a great deal of responsibility. She pushes one card, turns around another, and furrows her brow a bit, though Bailey still thinks she looks like she is trying to hide a smile. It is becoming easier to see her expression through the veil as his eyes adjust to the candlelight. You are part of a chain of events, though you may not see how your actions will affect the outcome at the time. I'm going to do something important, but I have to go somewhere first? Bailey asks. He had not expected fortune-telling to be so vague. The journey part does seem to favour his grandmother's side, though, even if Cambridge is not very far. The fortune-teller does not immediately respond. Instead, she flips over another card. This time, she does not hide her smile. You're looking for Poppet, she says. What's a puppet? He asks. The fortune-teller does not answer, and instead looks up from her cards and regards him quizzically. Bailey feels her taking in his entire appearance, or more than that, with her eyes moving over his face from his scarf to his hat. He shifts in his chair. Is your name Bailey? She asks. The colour drains from Bailey's cheeks, and all the apprehension and nervousness he had felt earlier returns instantly. He has to swallow before he can make himself answer in barely more than a whisper. Yes, he says. It sounds like a question, as though he is not entirely sure that it is indeed his name. The fortune-teller smiles at him, a bright smile that makes him realise she is not nearly as old as he had previously thought. Perhaps only a few years older than he is. Interesting, she says. He wishes she would choose a different word. We have a mutual acquaintance, Bailey. She looks back down at the cards on the table. You are here this evening looking for her, I believe, though I do appreciate that you've chosen to visit my tent as well. Bailey blinks at her, trying to take in everything she said, and wondering how on earth she knows the real reason he is at the circus when he has told no one about it and hardly even admits it to himself. You know the red-haired girl, he says, unable to fully believe that this is indeed what the fortune-teller means. But she nods. I have known her and her brother all their lives, she says. She is a very special girl with very lovely hair. Is she still here? Bailey asks. I only met her once, the last time the circus was here. She is here, the fortune-teller says. She pushes the cards around on the table a bit more, touching one and then another, though Bailey is no longer paying attention to which card is which. You will see her again, Bailey. There's no doubt about that. Bailey resists the urge to ask her when, and instead waits to see if she has anything else to add about the cards. The fortune-teller moves a card here and there. She picks up the card with the knight from where it sits and places it on top of the crumbling castle. Do you like the circus, Bailey? She asks, looking up at him again. It's like no place I've ever been, Bailey says. Not that I've been many places, he adds quickly, but I think the circus is wonderful. I like it very much. That would help, the fortune-teller says. Help with what? Bailey asks, but the fortune-teller does not answer. Instead, she flips over another card from the deck, placing it over the card with the knight. It is a picture of a lady pouring water into a lake, a bright shining star over her head. It is still difficult to discern her expressions through her veil, but Bailey is certain that she frowns at the card as she places it on the table, though when she looks back up at him, the frown is gone. You will be fine, the fortune-teller says. There may be decisions to make and surprises in store. Life takes us to unexpected places sometimes. The future is never set in stone, remember that. I will, Bailey says. He thinks the fortune-teller looks a bit sad as she begins to gather up the cards on the table, putting them back into a neat pile. She saves the knight for last, placing him on the top of the deck. Thank you, Bailey says. He did not receive as clear an answer about his future as he had expected, but somehow the issue does not seem as heavy as it did before. He debates whether to leave, unsure of proper fortune-telling etiquette. You're welcome, Bailey, the fortune-teller says. It was a pleasure to read for you. Bailey reaches into his pocket and pulls out the bag of chocolate mice and offers it to her. Would you like a mouse? He asks. Before he can mentally berate himself for doing something so silly, the fortune teller smiles, though for a moment there is something almost sad beneath it. "Why, yes, I would," she says, pulling out one of the chocolate mice, but from the bag by its licorice tail. She places it on the top of the crystal sphere. "They're one of my favourites," she confides. "Thank you, Bailey. Enjoy the rest of your time at the circus." "I will," Bailey says. He stands up and walks back to the beaded curtain. He reaches to part the strings of beads and stops suddenly and turns around. "What's your name?" he asks the fortune teller. "You know, I'm not sure any of my querents have ever asked that before," she says. "My name is Isabel." "It was nice to meet you, Isabel," Bailey says. "It was nice to meet you too, Bailey," Isabel says. "And you might want to go down the path to your right when you leave," she adds. Bailey nods and turns back, pushing through the strings of beads into the still empty vestibule. The beads are not so loud as they settle, and when they quiet, everything is soft and still, as though there is no other room behind them, no fortune teller sitting at her table. Bailey feels oddly at ease, as though he is closer to the ground but taller at the same time. His concerns about the future no longer weigh so heavily on him as he exits the tent, turning right down the curving path that winds between the striped tents. The Wizard in the Tree, Barcelona, November 1894. The rooms hidden behind the multitude of tents in Les Cirques des Rêves are a stark contrast to the black and white at the circus. Alive with colour, warm with glowing amber lamps. The space kept by the Murray twins is particularly vivid. A kaleidoscope of colour, blazing with carmine and coral and canary, so much so that the entire room often appears to be on fire, dotted with fluffy kittens, dark as soot and bright as sparks. It is occasionally suggested that the twins should be sent to boarding school to receive a proper education, but their parents insist that they learn more from living with such a diverse company and travelling the globe than they would confined by schoolrooms and books. The twins remain perfectly pleased with the arrangement, receiving irregular lessons on innumerable subjects and reading every book they can get their hands on, piles of them often ending up in the wrought iron cradle they would not part with after it was outgrown. They know every inch of the circus, moving from colour to black and white with ease, equally comfortable in both. Tonight they sit in a striped tent beneath a rather large tree, its branches black and bare of leaves. At this late hour there are no patrons lingering in this particular tent, and it is unlikely that any other visitors to the circus will stumble upon it in the remaining hours before dawn. The Murray twins lean against the massive trunk, sipping steaming cups of mulled cider. They have finished with their performances for the evening, and the remaining hours before dawn are theirs to spend as they please. "Do you want to read tonight?" Widget asks his sister. "We could take a walk, it's not that cold." He pulls a pocket watch from his coat to check the time. "It's not that late yet either," he adds, though their definition of late is what many would consider quite early. Poppet bites her lip in thought for a moment before answering. "No," she says. "Last time everything was all red and confusing. I think maybe I should wait a bit before I try again." "Red and confusing?" Poppet nods. "It was a bunch of things overlapping," she explains. "Fire and something red, but not at the same time. A man without a shadow. A feeling like everything was unraveling or tangling. The way the kittens pull yarn into knots, and you can't find the beginning or the end anymore." "Did you tell Celia about it?" Widget asks. "Not yet," Poppet says. "I don't like to tell her things that don't make any sense. Most times things make sense eventually." "That's true," Widget says. "Oh, another thing," Poppet says. "We're going to have company. That was in there somewhere too. I don't know if it was before or after the other things, or sometime in between." "Can you see who it is?" Widget asks. "No," Poppet answers simply. Widget is not surprised. What was the red something? He asks. Could you tell? Poppet closes her eyes, remembering. It looks like paint, she says. Widget turns to look at her. Paint, he asks. Like spilled paint on the ground, Poppet answers. She closes her eyes again, but then opens them quickly. Dark red. It's all sort of jumbled, and I don't really like the red bit. When I saw it, it hurt my head. The company part is nicer. Company would be nice, Widget says. Do you know when? Poppet shakes her head. Some of it feels soon. The rest of it feels far away. They sit quietly sipping their cider for a bit, leaning against the trunk of the tree. Tell me a story, please, Poppet says after a while. What kind of story? Widget asks. He always asks her, gives her an opportunity to make a request, even if he has one in mind already. Only preferred or special audiences receive such treatment. A story about a tree, Poppet says, looking up through the twisting black branches above them. Widget pauses before he starts, letting the tent and the tree settle into silent prologue while Poppet waits patiently. Secrets have power, Widget begins, and that power diminishes when they're shared, so they're best kept and kept well. Sharing secrets, real secrets, important ones, with even one other person will change them. Writing them down is worse, because who can tell how many eyes might see them inscribed on paper, no matter how careful you might be with it. So it's really best to keep your secrets when you have them, for their own good as well as yours. This is, in part, why there's less magic in the world today. Magic is secret, and secrets are magic after all. And years upon years of teaching and sharing magic, and worse, writing it down in fancy books that get all dusty with age has lessened it, removed its power bit by bit. It was inevitable perhaps, but not unavoidable. Everyone makes mistakes. The greatest wizard in history made the mistake of sharing his secrets. And his secrets were both magic and important, so it was a rather serious mistake. He told them to a girl. She was young and clever and beautiful. Poppet snorts into her cup. Widget stops. I'm sorry, she says. Go on, please, Widge. She was young and clever and beautiful, Widget continues, because if the girl had not been beautiful and clever, she would have been easier to resist, and then there would be no story at all. The wizard was old and quite clever himself, of course, and he had gone a very, very long time without telling his secrets to anyone at all. Maybe over the years he had forgotten about the importance of keeping them, or maybe he was distracted by her youth or beauty or cleverness. Maybe he was just tired, or maybe he had too much wine and didn't realize what he was doing. Whatever the circumstances, he told his deepest secrets to the girl, the hidden keys to all his magic. And when the secrets had passed from wizard to girl, they lost bits of their power, the way cats lose bits of fur when you pet them thoroughly. But they were still potent and effective and magical, and the girl used them against the wizard. She tricked him so that she could take his secrets and make them her own. She did not particularly care about keeping them. She probably wrote them down somewhere as well. The wizard himself, she trapped in a huge old oak tree, a tree like this one. And the magic she used to do so was strong, since it was the wizard's own magic, ancient and powerful, and he could not undo it. She left him there, and he could not be rescued since no one else knew he was inside the tree. He was not dead, though. The girl might have killed him if she could, after she had coerced his secrets out of him, but she could not kill him with his own magic. Though maybe she didn't want to at all. She was more concerned with power than with him, but she might have cared about him a little, enough to want to leave him with his life in a way. She settled for trapping him, and to her mind it served the same purpose. Though really, she did not succeed quite as well as she liked to think. She was careless in keeping her new magic secret. She flaunted it, and generally did not take very good care of it. Its power faded eventually, and so did she. The wizard, on the other hand, became part of the tree, and the tree thrived and grew, its branches spreading up to the sky and its roots reaching farther into the earth. He was part of the leaves and the bark and the sap, and part of the acorns that were carried away by squirrels to become new oak trees in other places. And when those trees grew, he was in those branches and leaves and roots as well. So by losing his secrets, the wizard gained immortality. His tree stood long after the clever young girl was old and no longer beautiful, and in a way, he became greater and stronger than he had ever been before. Though if he were given the chance to do it all over again, he likely would have been more careful with his secrets. As Widget finishes, the tent settles into silence again, but the tree feels more alive than it had before he started. "Thank you," Poppet says. "That was a good one. Kind of sad though, but kind of not at the same time." "You're welcome," Widget says. He takes a sip of his cider, now more warm than hot. He holds his cup in his hands and brings it to eye level, staring at it until a soft curl of steam rises from the surface. "Do mine too, please," Poppet says, holding out her cup. "I can never do it right." "Well, I can never levitate anything right, so we're even," Widget says, but he takes her cup without complaint and concentrates until it too is steaming and hot again. He moves to hand it back to her, and it floats from his hand to hers, the surface of the cider wavering with the motion but otherwise moving as smoothly as if it were sliding across a table. "Show off," Widget says. They sit sipping their newly warmed cider, looking up at the twisting black branches reaching towards the top of the tent. "Widge?" Poppet asks after a long silence. "Yes?" "Is it not that bad to be trapped somewhere then? Depending on where you're trapped?" "Suppose it depends on how much you like the place you're trapped in," Widget says. "And how much you like whoever you're stuck there with?" Poppet adds, kicking his black boot with her white one. Her brother laughs and the sound echoes through the tent, carried over the branches that are covered in candles, each flame flickering and white. Another one. Temporary Places, London, April 1895. Tara Burgess does not realise until after she has returned to London that the address on the card given to her by Mr. Barris is not a private residence at all, but the Midland Grand Hotel. She leaves the card sitting out on a table in her parlour for some time, glancing at it whenever she happens to be in the room, forgetting about it for stretches of time until she remembers it again. Lainey attempts to persuade Tara to join her for an extended holiday in Italy, but she refuses. Tara tells her sister little about her visit to Vienna, saying only that Ethan had asked after her. Lainey suggests that they might consider moving, and perhaps they should discuss it further when she returns. Tara only nods, giving her sister a warm embrace before Lainey departs. Alone in their townhouse, Tara wanders absently. She abandons half-read novels on chairs and tables. The invitations from Madame Padva to join her for tea or accompany her to the ballet are politely declined. She turns all of the mirrors in the house to face the walls. Those she cannot manage to turn, she covers with sheets, so they sit like ghosts in empty rooms. She has trouble sleeping. One afternoon, after the card has sat patiently gathering dust for months, she picks it up and places it in her pocket, and she is out the door and on her way to the train before she can decide whether or not the idea is a good one. Tara has never visited the clock-topped hotel attached to the St. Pancras station, but it strikes her immediately as a temporary place. Despite the size and solidity of the building, it feels impermanent, populated by a constant stream of guests and travellers on their way to and from other locations, stopping only briefly before continuing to other destinations. She inquires at the desk, but they claim to have no such person listed as a guest. She repeats the name several times after the desk clerk keeps mishearing her. She tries more than one variation, as the words on the card from Mr. Barris have been smudged, and she cannot recall the proper pronunciation. The longer she stands there, the more unsure she becomes that she has ever even heard the smudged name on the card pronounced. The clerk politely asks if she would like to leave a note, if perhaps the gentleman in question were to be arriving later in the day, but Tara declines, thanking the clerk for his time and replacing the card in her pocket. She wanders the lobby, wondering if the address is incorrect, though it is not like Mr. Barris to provide anything less than exact information. "Good afternoon, Miss Burgess," a voice next to her says. She has not noticed him approach, but the man whose name she still cannot recall the proper pronunciation of is standing by her shoulder in his distinctive grey suit. "Good afternoon," she echoes. "Were you looking for me?" he asks. "I was, in fact," Tara says. She starts to explain that Mr. Barris sent her. She reaches into her pocket, but there is no card within it, and she stops, confused. "Is something wrong?" the man in the grey suit asks. "No," Tara says, now unsure if she remembered to bring the card or if it is still sitting on a table in her parlour. "I wanted to speak with you about the circus." "Very well," he says. He waits for her to begin, his expression bearing something that could be construed as very mild interest. She does her best to explain her concern, that there is more going on with the circus than most people are privy to, that there are elements she can find no reasonable explanations for. She repeats some of the things she mentioned to Mr. Barris, the concern of not being able to be certain if anything is real, how disconcerting it is to look in a mirror and see the same face unchanged for years. She falters frequently, finding it difficult to articulate precisely what she means. The expression of very mild interest does not change. "What is it you would like from me, Miss Burgess?" he asks when she has finished. "I would like an explanation," she says. He regards her with the same unchanged expression for some time. "The circus is simply a circus," he says. "An impressive exhibition, but no more than that. Don't you agree?" Tara nods before she can properly process the response. "Do you have a train to catch, Miss Burgess?" he asks. "Yes," Tara says. She had forgotten about her train. She wonders what time it is, but she cannot find a clock to check. "I am headed towards the station myself, if you do not mind an escort." They walk the short distance from the hotel to the train platforms together. He holds doors open for her. He makes empty remarks about the weather. "I think it may be in your best interest to find something else to occupy your time," he says when they reach the trains. "Something to take your mind off the circus. Don't you agree?" Tara nods again. "Good day, Miss Burgess," he says with a tip of his hat. "Good day," she echoes. He leaves her on the platform, and when she turns after him to see which way he went, the grey suit is nowhere to be found amongst the crowd. Tara stands near the edge of the platform, waiting for her train. She cannot recall telling Mr. A.H. which train it was she would be taking, but he has deposited her on the proper platform nonetheless. She feels as though there was something else she meant to ask, but now she cannot recall what it was. She cannot recall much of anything about the conversation, save for the impression that there is something else she should be spending her time on, somewhere else to be, some other matter that is more deserving of her attention. She is wondering what that might be when a flash of grey on the opposite platform catches her eye. Mr. A.H. stands in a shadowy corner, and even with the distance and the shadows, Tara can tell he is arguing with someone she cannot see. Other people pass by without even glancing in their direction. When the light from the arching overhead windows shifts, Tara can see who Mr. A.H. is arguing with. The man is not quite as tall. The top of his hat sits levelled like a step down from the grey one, so much so that at first Tara thinks the man is only a reflection and finds it odd that Mr. A.H. would be arguing with his own reflection in the middle of a train station. But the other suit is distinctly darker. The reflection's hair is longer, though it is a similar shade of grey. Through the steam and the crowd, Tara can make out the bright spots of lace at the cuffs of the shirt, the dark eyes that catch the light more than the rest of the man's face. Aspects settle temporarily and then vanish into distorted shadows once more, never remaining steady for more than a moment. The light filtering in from above shifts again, and the figure quavers as though she were watching through a heat haze, though Mr. A.H. remains comparatively crisp and clear. Tara takes a step forward, her gaze fixated on the apparition on the opposite platform. She does not see the train. Another one.
Yes, more.
Movement. Munich, April 1895. Herr Thiessen is always pleased when the circus arrives in his native Germany, but this time he is particularly delighted that it has arrived quite near Munich, so there is no need for him to secure rooms in another city. Also, he has been promised a visit from Miss Celia Bowen. He has never met her, though they have been exchanging letters for years, and she has expressed an interest in seeing his workshop if he would not mind. Friedrich replied that of course he did not mind in the least, and she would be welcome at any time. Despite so many letters, each carefully filed in his office, he is uncertain what to expect when she arrives. He is astonished to find the woman he knows as the illusionist standing in the doorway. She is unmistakable, though she wears a gown of dusty rose rather than the black and white creations he is accustomed to seeing her in. Her skin appears warmer, her hair softly curled, and her hat bears no resemblance to the distinctive silk top hat, but he would know her face anywhere. "This is an honour," he says by way of greeting. "Most people don't recognise me outside of the circus," Celia says as he takes her hand. "Then most people are fools," he says, lifting her hand to his lips and lightly kissing the back of her glove. "Though I feel a fool myself for not knowing who you were all this time." "I should have told you," Celia says. "I do apologise." "No apology is necessary. I should have guessed you were not merely a rêveur from the way you wrote about the circus. You know every corner better than most." "I am familiar with a great deal of the corners, not all of them." "There remain mysteries in the circus even for its own illusionist. That is impressive." Celia laughs, and Friedrich takes her on a tour of his workshop. The workshop is organised so that the front is occupied mostly by blueprints and sketches, moving onto long tables covered in various parts and a great deal of sawdust, drawers full of gears and tools. Celia listens with rapt attention as he describes the entire process, asking questions about the technical aspects as well as the creative ones. He is surprised to learn that she is fluent in German, though they have only written each other in English. "I speak languages with more ease than I read or write them," she explains. "It is something in the feel of the sounds. I could attempt to put them on paper, but I am sure the result would be appalling." Despite his greying hair, Friedrich looks younger when he smiles. Celia cannot keep her eyes from his hands as he shows her the delicate clockwork mechanisms. She pictures the same fingers inscribing each letter she has received and read so many times that she has committed them to memory, finding it strange that she feels shy with someone she knows so well. He watches her with equal attentiveness as they traverse the shelves of timepieces in varying stages of construction. "May I ask you something?" he says, as she looks at a collection of detailed figurines waiting patiently amongst curls of wood to be housed in their proper clocks. Of course, Celia says, though she fears he will ask her how she does her magic, and she dreads having to lie to him. You have been in the city as I on so many occasions, and yet this is the first time you have asked to meet. Why is that? Celia looks back at the figurines on the table before she responds. Friedrich reaches out and rights a tiny ballerina that has fallen sideways, returning her to balance on her ribbon slippers. Before, I did not want you to know who I was, Celia says. I thought you might think of me differently if you did. But after so long, I felt I was being dishonest. I had wanted to tell you the truth for some time, and I could not resist the chance to see your workshop. I hope you can forgive me. You have nothing to be forgiven for, Friedrich says. A woman I should like to think I know rather well, and a woman I had always considered a mystery are in fact the same person. It is surprising, but I do not mind a good surprise. Though I am curious as to why you wrote me that first letter. I enjoyed your writings on the circus, Celia says. It is a perspective that I am not able to view it from properly because I understand it in a different way. I like being able to see it through your eyes. When she looks up at him, his soft blue eyes are bright in the afternoon sunlight that shines through the windows, illuminating the speckles of sawdust in the air. Thank you, Miss Bowen, Friedrich says. Celia, she corrects. He gives her a thoughtful nod before continuing the tour. The back walls are covered with finished or nearly finished timepieces. Clocks waiting only for final coats of varnish or other minor details. The clocks closest to the windows are already in motion, each moving in its unique way but keeping the same harmonious rhythm, a symphony of carefully ordered ticking. The one that attracts Celia's attention rests on a table rather than hanging on the wall or sitting on a shelf. It is a beautiful piece, more sculpture than clock. While many of the clocks are wood, this one is predominantly dark, oxidized metal. A large round cage set on a wooden base that has been carved into swirling white flames. Within, there are overlapping metal hoops marked with numbers and symbols suspended from the top, hanging amongst the visible gears and a series of stars falling from the filigree cap at the top. But the clock sits quiet, unmoving. This one reminds me of the bonfire, Celia says. Is it not finished? No, it is complete, but broken, Friedrich replies. It was an experiment, and the components are difficult to balance properly. He turns it so she can see the way the workings extend through the entirety of the cage, stretching in all directions. The mechanics are complex, as it tracks astronomical movement as well. I shall have to remove the base and dismantle it entirely to get it running again. I have not yet had the time it will require. May I? Celia asks, reaching out to touch it. When he nods, she removes one of her gloves and rests her hand on the metal bars of the cage. She only watches it thoughtfully, but she makes no attempt to move it. To Friedrich, it appears she is gazing through the clock rather than simply looking at it. Inside, the mechanism begins to turn, the cogs and gears waltzing together as the number-marked hoops spin into place. The hands glide to indicate the proper time, the planetary alignments set themselves in order. Everything within the cage rotates slowly, the silver stars sparkling as they catch the light. Once the slow, steady tick begins, Celia removes her hand. Friedrich does not inquire as to how she managed it. Instead, he takes her to dinner. They do not speak of the circus, but spend most of the meal discussing books and art, wine and favourite cities. The pauses in the conversation are not awkward, though they struggle to find the same rhythm in speaking that was already present in their written exchanges, often switching from one language to another. Why haven't you asked me how I do my tricks? Celia asks, once they have reached the point where she is certain he is not simply being polite about the matter. Friedrich considers the question thoroughly before he responds. Because I do not wish to know, he says. I prefer to remain unenlightened to better appreciate the dark. The sentiment delights Celia so that she cannot properly respond in any of their common languages, and she only smiles at him over her wine. Besides, Friedrich continues, you must be asked such things constantly. I find I am more interested in learning about the woman than the magician. I hope that is acceptable. It's perfect, Celia says. They walk together to the circus afterward, past red-roofed buildings glowing in the dying light, going their separate ways only once they reach the courtyard. Friedrich remains mystified as to why no one else seems to recognize her as she walks anonymously amongst the crowd. When he watches her performance, she only catches his eye once with a subtle smile, giving no other hint of recognition. Later, long after midnight, she appears by his side as he walks, wearing a cream-coloured coat and a deep green scarf. Your scarf should be red, Friedrich remarks. I am not a proper rêveur, Celia says. It would not feel right. But as she speaks, her scarf shifts in hue to a rich wine-like burgundy. Is that better? It is perfect, Friedrich says, though his gaze remains fixed on her eyes. She takes his offered arm, and they walk together along the twisting pathways through the dwindling crowd of patrons. They repeat this routine in the following evenings, though the circus does not remain in Munich long, once the news arrives from London.
More. More?
More?
More. More.
More, please.
Can't end on that cliffhanger.
News.
How are we doing for time?
It's just before 10. You've totally got time. You started late.
That is true.
Entirely up to you, Frankie.
Let's go for it.
Yay.
Yay.
Love you.
Thank you, Frankie.
I must drink. I'm so parched. In loving memory of Tara Burgess, Glasgow, April 1895. The funeral is a quiet one, despite the number of mourners present. There are no sobs or flailing handkerchiefs. There is a smattering of colour amongst the sea of traditional black. Even the light rain cannot push it down into the realms of despair. It rests instead in a space of thoughtful melancholy. Perhaps it is because it does not feel as though Tara Burgess is entirely gone when her sister sits alive and well. One half of the pair still breathing and vibrant. And at the same time, something looks strikingly wrong to everyone who lays eyes on the surviving sister. Something they can't quite put their finger on, something out of balance. An occasional tear rolls down Lady Lainey Burgess's cheek, but she greets each mourner with a smile and thanks them for attending. She makes jokes that Tara might have quipped were she not inside the polished wood coffin. There are no other family members present, though some less familiar acquaintances assume that the white-haired woman and bespectacled man who seldom leave Lainey's side are her mother and husband, respectively. While they are incorrect, neither Madame Padver nor Mr. Barras mind the mistake. There are countless roses. Red roses, white roses, pink roses. There is even a single black rose amongst the blossoms, though no one knows its origin. Chandresh takes credit only for the white blooms, keeping one pinned to his lapel that he toys with distractedly throughout the service. When Lainey speaks about her sister, her words are met with sighs and laughter and sad smiles. I do not mourn the loss of my sister because she will always be with me in my heart, she says. I am, however, rather annoyed that my Tara has left me to suffer you lot alone. I do not see as well without her. I do not hear as well without her. I do not feel as well without her. Then at least she would be here to mock my appearance and claim to be the pretty one for a change. We have all lost our Tara, but I have lost a part of myself as well. In the cemetery, there is a single performer that even some of the mourners who are not part of Les Cirques de Rêve recognize, though the woman bedecked from head to toe in snowiest white has added a pair of feathered wings to her costume. They cascade down her back and flutter gently in the breeze while she remains still as stone. Many of the attendants seem surprised by her presence, but they take their cues from Lainey, who is delighted at the sight of the living angel standing over her sister's grave. It was the Burgess sisters, after all, who originated the tradition of such statues within the circus. Performers standing stock still with elaborate costumes and painted skin on platforms set up in precarious spaces between tents. If watched for hours, they sometimes change position entirely, but the motion will be agonizingly slow, to the point that many observers insist that they are cleverly crafted automatons and not proper people. The circus contains several of these performers. The star-speckled Empress of the Night, the cold-dark Black Pirate. The one that now watches over Tara Burgess is most often referred to as the Snow Queen. There is the softest of sobbing as the coffin is lowered into the ground, but it is difficult to pinpoint who it is coming from, or if it is instead a collective sound of mingled sighs and wind and shifting feet. The rain increases and umbrellas sprout like mushrooms among the graves. The damp dirt turns quickly to mud, and the remainder of the burial is hastened to accommodate the weather. The ceremony fades out rather than ending properly, the mourners shifting from neat roads to mingling crowd without a distinct moment to mark the change. Many linger to pass additional condolences on to Lainey, though some move off to seek shelter from the rain before the last of the dirt has settled. Isabel and Tsukiko stand side by side some distance from Tara's grave, sharing a large black umbrella that Isabel holds over their head in one black-gloved hand. Tsukiko insists she does not mind the rain, but Isabel shelters her anyway, grateful for the company. How did she die? Tsukiko asks. It is a question that others have asked in hushed whispers throughout the afternoon, and have been met with various answers, few of them satisfying. Those who know the details are not forthcoming. I was told it was an accident, Isabel says quietly. She was hit by a train. Tsukiko nods thoughtfully, pulling a silver cigarette holder and matching lighter from the pocket of her coat. How did she really die? She asks. What do you mean? Isabel says, looking around to see if anyone is close enough to overhear their conversation, but most of the mourners have dissipated into the rain. Only a handful remain, including Celia Bowen with Poppet Murray clinging to her gown, the girl wearing a frown that seems more angry than sad. Lainey and Mr. Barris stand next to Tara's grave, the angel hovering over them close enough to lay its hands upon their heads. You have seen things that defy belief, have you not? Tsukiko asks. Isabel nods. Do you perhaps think those things would be more difficult to reconcile if you were not part of them yourself? Perhaps to the point of driving one mad? The mind is a sensitive thing. I don't think she stepped in front of the train on purpose, Isabel says, trying to keep her voice as low as possible. Perhaps not, Tsukiko says. I contend it is a possibility, at the very least. She lights a cigarette, the flame catching easily despite the dampness of the air. It could have been an accident, Isabel says. Have you had any accidents recently? Any broken bones, burns, any injury at all? Tsukiko asks. No, Isabel says. Have you taken ill? Even the slightest of sniffles? No. Isabel racks her brain for the last time she felt under the weather, and she can only come up with a head cold she had a decade ago, the winter before she met Marco. I do not believe any of us have since the circus started, Tsukiko says, and no one has died until now. No one has been born either, not since the Murray twins, though it is not for lack of trying, given the way some of the acrobats carry on. Isabel starts but cannot finish. It is too much for her to wrap her mind around, and she is not sure she wants to be able to understand it. We are fish in a bowl, dear, Tsukiko tells her, cigarette holder dangling precariously from her lips. Very carefully monitored fish, watched from all angles. If one of us floats to the top, it was not accidental. And if it was an accident, I worry that the watchers are not as careful as they should be. Isabel stays silent. She wishes Marco had accompanied Chandresh, though she doubts he would answer any of her questions if he consented to speaking to her at all. Every reading she has done privately on the matter has been complicated, but there is always the presence of strong emotion on his part. She knows he cares about the circus. She has never had any reason to doubt that. Have you ever read your cards for someone who could not understand what they were dealing with, even though to you it was clear from only a short conversation and pictures on paper? Tsukiko asks. Yes, Isabel says. She has seen them hundreds of times, the querents who could not see things for what they were. Blind to betrayals and heartbreak, and always stubborn, no matter how gently she tried to explain. It is difficult to see a situation for what it is when you are in the middle of it, Tsukiko says. It is too familiar, too comfortable. Tsukiko pauses. The curls of smoke from her cigarette slide between the raindrops as they wind around her head and up into the damp air. Perhaps the late Miss Burgess was close enough to the edge that she could see it differently, she says. Isabel frowns, looking back towards Tara's grave. Lainey and Mr. Barris have turned and are walking away slowly, his arm around her shoulders. Have you ever been in love, Kiko? Isabel asks. Tsukiko's shoulders stiffen as she exhales slowly. For a moment, Isabel thinks her question will go unanswered, but then she replies. I have had affairs that lasted decades and others that lasted hours. I have loved princesses and peasants, and I suppose they loved me, each in their own way. This is a typical Tsukiko response, one that does not truly answer the question. Isabel does not pry. It will come apart, Tsukiko says after a long while. Isabel does not need to ask what she means. The cracks are beginning to show. Sooner or later, it is bound to break. She pauses to take a final drag off her cigarette. Are you still tempering? Yes, Isabel says, but I don't think it's helping. It is difficult to discern the effect of such things, you know. Your perspective is from the inside, after all. The smallest charms can be the most effective. It doesn't seem to be very effective. Perhaps it is controlling the chaos within more than the chaos without. Isabel does not reply. Tsukiko shrugs and says no more. After a moment, they turn to leave together without discussion. The snow-white angel alone remains, hovering over Tara Burgess's fresh grave, holding a single black rose in one hand. She does not move, does not even bat an eyelash. Her powdered face stays frozen in sorrow. The increasing rain pulls stray feathers from her wings and pins them to the mud below. Labyrinth. You walk down a hallway papered in playing cards, row upon row of clubs and spades. Lanterns fashioned from additional cards hang above, swinging gently as you pass by. A door at the end of the hall leads to a spiraling iron staircase. The stairs go both up and down. You go up, finding a trapdoor in the ceiling. The room it opens into is full of feathers that flutter downward. When you walk through them, they fall like snow over the door and the floor, obscuring it from sight. There are 6 identical doors. You choose one at random, trailing a few feathers with you. The scent of pine is overwhelming as you enter the next room to find yourself in a forest full of evergreen trees. Only these trees are not green, but bright and white, luminous in the darkness surrounding them. They are difficult to navigate. As soon as you begin walking, the walls are lost in shadows and branches. There is a sound like a woman laughing nearby, or perhaps it is only the rustling of the trees as you push your way forward, searching for the next door, the next room. You feel the warmth of breath on your neck, but when you turn, there is no one there.
Wow. Tara's dead.
Frankie.
Shit's getting real.
My God.
Yeah.
That feels like it was quite a journey.
Oof.
Oh, yeah.
Oof. Everyone okay? Everyone holding up all right? No?
Tell us.
Mm?
Tell us, Frankie.
Okay. You ready? Okay. Come close. Come close.
Okay.
You listening? Yeah? Okay. Everything is going to be okay. Everything is going to be absolutely fine.
Love you.
Love you. Love you all.
Oh, Liz.
Liz?
She has a sore throat, so she's not talking, but she says she loves us all, but isolation involves far too much talking.
Your doors?
Liz, we love you too. We love you too, baby girl. Yeah. Everyone seems a bit like wrung out and exhausted after that.
It was emotional.
It was a sad chapter.
It was a sad chapter. I'm sorry. It was a sad chapter.
I don't think it's your fault, Frankie.
I'll find a happier chapter for the next one. If necessary, we'll go back and read the beginning again.
There's just some heavy emotional lifting in the middle section of this book.
Yeah, man. On the bright side, I bought a copy of Stardust today. So we'll see when that comes, but that is looking like it might be the next, or maybe the next. I mean, I'll have a look over all my friends are superheroes, because that's it, and will be a nice little short one. I'll have a look over and see if that seems like it'll be suitable, but maybe after that.
Really lovely.
With no accents.
Yeah.
No accents.
Not even
No, but we love that accent.
Your Scottish accents are really good.
You're really lovely.
Your accents are lovely.
Thanks. You're lovely. I really appreciate your support in this difficult time.
Oh, they're fantastic, honestly. Yeah.
Oh, well, I'm going to put some work into them for next. If the next book looks like it requires voices, I'm gonna do some YouTube tutorialing.
I mean, if the next book is Stardust, a lot of that is so fantasy that they don't need to have like accents.
Oh, perfect. Perfect. Well, as long as all of the characters look like a kind of sort of posh, fruity lady, that will be fine.
I can cope with that.
I think we need more West Country.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine.
You requested Welsh earlier because Welsh accents are pretty delightful.
Yeah.
I just want all the accents.
Quite difficult.
I quite like Orkney.
Yes, which sounds kind of like Welsh, but a bit Scottish also.
Well, that's good to hear. I could probably manage that.
What's the question was
that is an uneasy mixture of Welsh and Scottish. Yeah, that sounds perfect.
Do we need to find a deputy for Liz for story time tomorrow if she is still voiceless?
Oh. Yes. I mean, that depends on Liz. Liz, how would you like to do it? I know you can't respond in speech, but do you want to put off your kids' story time, or do you want to request it?
I think she's typing.
I think she's typing as well.
Will some